Welcome to the Journey to Birth podcast. I'm Tristan, the creator of the Natural Birth Compass online childbirth education program. And today I am sharing with you the third part of a four-part series from a workshop that I held in June of 2020 about the 4 critical strategies that you need to prepare for natural birth. This episode will cover the third of the 4 critical strategies, which is learning how to use your communication to avoid being subject to manipulation in your pregnancy, in your birth, and even as you become a parent to the newest member of your family. If you're enjoying these workshop episodes, be sure to subscribe. I will be bringing the final part of this workshop very soon. If you'd like to be notified of upcoming live virtual workshops, please visit naturalbirthcompass.com/naturalbirthworkshop and get on the list to be the first to know of our next workshop. And now, join me on the Journey to Birth podcast. Imagine transforming the anxiety, the worry, and uncertainty you have about your birth right now into the confidence and knowledge that will end everyone's questions about your natural birth and even have them asking you how you did it. Are you ready to stop imagining your wonderful birth and start preparing to experience it? Then you're in the right place. I'm Tristan, the creator of the Natural Birth Compass online childbirth education program. And I'm coming to your ears with perspectives of birth from across time and cultures to help you become more informed and confident in your birth. So grab your mug, fill it with your favorite tea, and let's begin the journey to birth. Was it easy for you to figure out your types once you had the assessment, or were there some of you for whom it was more difficult? So I listened to a lot of podcasts, and there was this one that I heard. It was a birth story podcast, and it was a mom who had 5 births. And in this particular episode, she was talking about the difference between her fourth and her fifth birth experiences, because in her fourth birth, she actually had an unassisted birth. So that means she had no medical providers with her at that birth at all. It was just her husband and her 3 children there. There was no trained birth professionals there anyway. And she had a really wonderful experience for that fourth birth. And then when she was pregnant with her the fifth baby she had, I don't remember if it was in a hospital or a freestanding birth center, but it was with midwives. So this took place in Canada. So when she was pregnant with her fourth, Canada actually didn't have any midwives at the time. That was part of why she ended up deciding to birth by herself without having a care provider there. Instead of going to the hospital and birthing with an OB, they just chose to do it on their own. But when her fifth child was conceived, they had brought midwives back to practice in the area she was in again, but they only had a handful of them. So you had to enter a lottery because they couldn't fit everybody in who wanted care from the midwives. So she decided to try to get in with the midwives this time and just see what happened. And by chance, her name was drawn from that lottery to receive care from the midwives. So what's interesting about this story is you can really hear she's very strong in her type. And I'm curious to see if you guys can pick up what she is. So I'm going to walk you through some of the things that she mentioned that really stand out for me what her type is. So in the thought process, as she is telling the story, and when you think you know it, you can put it in the chat. What she says about using those midwives, even though she'd had this amazing free birth, this unassisted birth experience, is that she felt bad that so many other women had entered the lottery to be chosen to work with these midwives, and her name was one of the ones drawn. So even though she would have been more than comfortable to have given birth again unassisted, she felt really guilty in if she declined the help because she had like won this lottery, right, against all the odds, and taken a spot that so many other people wanted. So she had kind of this guilt about not taking the spot. And then she goes on to talk about how the midwives, even though she was really in support of midwifery, these midwives were very medically oriented and they were making a lot of suggestions and recommendations. Like she really felt like they were managing her birth in a way that made her really uncomfortable after having given birth 4 times already. And that fourth one she did alone, unassisted. But she talks about how she didn't really discuss how she was feeling with the midwives. She didn't tell them what she wanted or the kind of support that she needed because she didn't really want to rock the boat. She didn't want to make her midwives feel like they would be put in any kind of difficult situation if she said no to something that they really were encouraging her to do or to accept. She kept saying that she just wanted to be the good patient and not cause any trouble. Are you guys able to tell what you think her predominant direction is that she resonates with? And if you can you already tell where this might lead to some obstacles for her in her labor and birth? What I heard from her is that she's really wanting to take care of the midwives. She's really wanting to make them comfortable instead of guiding them in how to support her. She doesn't want them to feel like they have to compromise their care or their license and wants to make them feel really comfortable with having her as a patient. And she actually does identify when she's having this discussion with these birth workers about her fifth birth that she now recognizes that what she was doing was actually affecting her birth environment, and it was all coming from her. It wasn't anything that the midwives were doing maliciously. It was how she was guiding her own care from them. And this, yes, Natanya, this is a classic West type. Instead of being taken care of, she's really trying to take care of the care providers. And really care providers really enjoy having West patients because they love how easily a West patient will compromise with what it is that the provider wants to do, and how the West patient really wants to be that really good patient. And it's not in a malicious way on behalf of the doctors or the midwives. In fact, they probably don't even realize that they're doing this, that they're kind of manipulating these personality types behind the scenes of their interactions with these patients. But it is actually what's happening. And this happens in all kinds of scenarios throughout our life, in our workplace, in our families, within different kinds of relationships that we have on all levels, not just care provider and patient, but it's especially noticeable and especially vulnerable when we're talking about that kind of care provider and patient, authority, and a person who's kind of receiving the effects of the authority kinds of situations that birth can leave us predisposed to. So, when we're having interactions with other people in our environment and other people that we have to work with in some capacity or another, our types and their types, they're always trying to find harmony or not. And that's exactly why knowing these aspects about yourself are so important all the time, but especially in a situation like birth, where you're already vulnerable, where you may already be seeing your care provider as an authority. You really kind of want to check that, where you might have some dependence upon their skill, upon their knowledge, and you might need their guidance. That's why you have a care provider attending your birth if you're choosing to do so. And it's possible that at some point you might actually need their aid. You might actually need some kind of medical assistance. That's not something that never happens in birth. We do know that we it's it can be helpful to have somebody there who has experience, who has a medical background, just in case something unexpected arises in birth that does require that level of care. Now, it doesn't happen that much in birth, not nearly as often as we're led to believe it happens. So you want to really, be aware of when you're being subject to manipulation in the case of unnecessary interventions or unnecessary suggestions that might derail the kind of birth that you actually want to have. So that's going to be our focus for today, your communication style and how you can use it to be more prepared for your birth. So I hope that you enjoyed what you learned about yourself yesterday and you've had some time to kind of process everything that we packed into that class and identify your birth type. I see quite a few of you have been able to do that, kind of figure out your guiding direction. Some of you have actually already even been able to figure out your partner, which is great for today because we're going to talk about that too. So let me know as we go along if you have any questions as we go, or anything comes up for you while we cover the material today. So, today we're going to take what you discovered about yourself yesterday, your birth type, and we're going to talk about how that plays a role in your communication style and how knowing this information about yourself can help your birth partner to help you more so in birth than just being the person who's standing there next to you. So, I would love to know in the chat, have you, as you're preparing for your birth, have you been looking for ways to get your birth partner more involved in the whole preparation for birth, in kind of anticipating how they're going to be a part of the whole birth process, or trying to learn how it is that you can help them to help you? Has anybody here been struggling with that part of their birth prep so far? It can really be a struggle for a lot of reasons. And I actually will talk a little bit about my thoughts on that topic as we go when we get more focused in on the birth partner portion of the class today. But I'm curious if anybody here feels like they've been struggling a little bit with that part of their birth preparation. And if you have, it's completely normal to feel like that, trying to get your birth partner involved or helping them to understand how to be involved. Some birth partners, they really do want to be all in on the birth process. They want to be a part of the whole birth unfolding. They just really don't know how to do that. They don't know what their role is actually going to look like in the whole dynamic of the birth team. So, we're going to be clarifying some of that today too, especially when it's a first baby, because you really, for most of us, we have no idea what to expect when it's a first birth, because as we talked about yesterday, most of us don't see real birth until we have our own. And that's also true for most of our birth partners too, right? So, first, I just want to take a minute to review the four types that we covered because the material for today does build on the types we covered yesterday. So, just in case anybody who's watching this doesn't know what we're talking about, I'm just going to do a really quick review. So, we have the whole idea of this framework that's built on the directions and overall a compass. So, I just want to recap our types here. So, we have East. Our East people are very direct. They're very straight to the point. These are our planners. And then we have our South type. They are open. They're really warm. They're our outgoing people who create connections within our communities. We have the West types who are really the nurturing and the caregiving souls. They really tend to and care for other people in our communities. And then we have the Norths who are very detail oriented. They're more the internalized introverts who are very observant and very calculated and tend to be kind of our problem solver type of people because they have those potent skills of observations. So then yesterday, we also went over specifics in regard to strengths and challenges and areas of preparation that apply to each of these directions. And hopefully by the end of that class, you found the one maybe you might still be in the area of feeling like you have two that you resonate with most strongly. So I just want to also remind you here that this idea of these four directions, these four types, it's really a spectrum, or in the full scope of it, it's really a cycle. And we all use some of these aspects of each of these directions at different points in our lives. But we're going to have one that's really our strongest, one that we lean on the most. And likewise, you probably also have one that you're noticing that shows up for you the least. That's kind of your weakest direction. So as we move into communication for birth, I just want to make sure that you have a foundation of how to apply this information in your birth so that it's useful. Because, as I've talked about over the last couple of days, having more information in your brain is not helpful unless it's something that you can practically apply. And it's something that you don't have to think about or pull in the thinking part of your brain. It just comes naturally, it just becomes second nature to you. When you don't really know how to draw on your communication skills or use those communication skills that you already have, you just need to recognize them. Or all you're taught to apply in regard to communications are those benefits and risk acronyms. You may leave yourself too open to being manipulated while you're in birth, even if it's manipulation that your care provider or your family member or even your friend feels like they're offering you in your best interest, and it's not with any kind of malintent, but it is still manipulation over something that should be yours, something that you should be free to make a decision about without having to worry about any kind of judgment or shame. So while we're here on this topic, I just want to take a minute also to dive a little bit more into the concern I have with the acronyms. Do you guys know what I'm talking about when I say the acronyms? There's one called BRAIN, there's one called BRAND. They're a memory tool that is taught in most classes, or you'll read it in books. It teaches you how to remember the different questions to ask if an intervention or some kind of suggestion is made to you in your pregnancy or in your birth. The letters are for brain, that B is benefits, R is risks, A is alternatives, I is intuition, and N is nothing. What happens if we do nothing? And this is the way that most childbirth education schools teach you how to communicate with your care provider, is just to ask for this level of information. The trouble that I find with these methods is that it still leaves you really open to trust that the person who's giving you the information about that intervention is giving you all the information that you actually need to make, or that they're giving you that information in an unbiased and non-judgmental way, which in most cases is actually impossible for them to do, because they probably have a choice that they really want you to make. That's why they suggest the intervention that they're offering, because they have a path that they want you to take, and they're going to give you the information in a way that's going to possibly unknowingly to you bias you toward making the choice that they want you to make. So you might be at the mercy of them giving you information based upon their agenda of what they want you to do, or what the policies dictate, depending on where you are for your birth, that, the different policies of things that they need to try to have you to do in order to meet the requirements of the birth facility that you're at. And you're also open to whatever they don't know. They may not even be aware of all of the other alternatives or the options. Even though you may be with an obstetrician or a midwife who's very well trained and has many years of experience, they still only know what they know. So if you don't have an open line of communication with them, and you don't have clarity on the birth cycle to help guide you through the natural stages of birth and help you know what is going right and what is going wrong, if anything is going wrong, which is a whole nother level that we don't have time to get into in much depth this week. I'll touch on it a little bit tomorrow. But if you don't have these tools in your birth room, then you may end up closing yourself off to coming up with other options yourself. Or you may find yourself accepting an intervention that you really didn't need because it seemed like the best option in the moment with the information that you were given. So often in birth, it's not until after the fact, when we finally get the information that we needed in the moment, that we made the choice and we realize that there were other options, there were other alternatives, or what was happening was actually completely normal. We just didn't give it enough time, or we could have made another choice, like maybe a different position or moving into a shower, or all kinds of other types of things that may have been available, but you didn't really know how to utilize them. So, yesterday we talked about how everybody else around you is going to be concerned about the outcome of your birth, getting you to the point where they can check off that box of healthy mom and healthy baby. Just by the very nature of them having that goal in mind for you, that alone means they already have a bias and they already have some kind of judgments about what they want you to do to get to that point. Those biases that we all have, but in the case of your care provider and birth attendant, they've been formed by their education, of course, is a big part of where they learn what they know, their experience that they've had with birth up to that point. Of course, their own perceptions of birth have been formed based on all of those interactions. And then they have the policies and the procedures that they have to follow for their license and by the facility that they attend birth in. Even with midwives, even if you're doing a home birth with a midwife, if they're a licensed midwife, they still have a board they have to answer to. They still have colleagues that they have to be respectful of. If one midwife makes a mistake, it affects the whole community of midwives. So they kind of have to be responsible to one another in that way. So all of those things are going to factor in to how your care provider helps you make decisions and guides you in that. So it's really important that you know that in the back of your mind, that even though they are there to support you and they are there to care for you, they do have this end goal that doesn't factor in your experience as much as it factors in the outcome for you. Now, sometimes the biases and the judgments that are clouding the information that they're giving you, sometimes it doesn't matter because it's still going to be aligned with what you feel is really right, given the situation that you're in or given the moment of what's happening. But sometimes it won't be aligned with what it is that you want to do or what you think is most right. And this is where you need to be careful that you have a full communication strategy, not just an acronym, and that you also understand really the true nature of birth so you don't fall into the hands of being manipulated, even if it's manipulation out of love, or being subject to straight up confusion, usually because of different policies or protocols or regulations that your care providers or are subject to. So when you learn your communication strategy, well, like how we talked about with getting savvy and getting sassy, it takes a little bit of work. It takes a little bit of time. It's something that you really have to prioritize and focus on. And it's going to be a little bit different what you need to prioritize and how you prepare for this, depending on your birth type, because each type has different strengths and challenges, as we covered yesterday. And we'll cover a little bit more in regard to communication today. So I quickly just want to review the strengths and challenges of each type as it pertains a little bit more focused in on communication. So East people, their strengths are really having clarity in their vision and their plan, and being able to get really straight to the point, which can be really helpful when you don't have time to extrapolate and spend a lot of time thinking about things. But their challenges are that they're not always open to discussion or to suggestion, and they can become so dependent or so attached to their plan that they can actually shut down if things deviate too far from anything else that they've envisioned. Now, they'll often have a plan for this or a plan for that because they can see that things may go off course. Sometimes people who are really strong in their east may not even see all of the potential. They may only have one vision for their birth, and that's what they think is going to happen. And then when that doesn't happen, they don't know what to do. Many East people will have planned for multiple things. But if something else happens that they didn't plan for, that can be a really big struggle for them. And then for the South, our South people are open communicators. So they're generally comfortable in asking questions. Usually, communication itself is not a problem for them. But where they do face challenges is being open to suggestion in order to make other people around them happy because they're too open sometimes. And that can make it too easy for them to accept interventions or options that you don't really want because you can really lose your true direction by really being caught up in trying to fulfill other people's wishes and trying to make other people happy with how you're being as the patient. And then West people are very good listeners. So they do tend to be open to receiving information, and they're very aware of supporting everybody else's needs. These are the caregivers, right? They also can be really aware of their own needs as well, but they may tend to put their own needs last if they see that there's other people around who are in need of nurturing. That makes them much more comfortable than being nurtured themselves. So their biggest challenge can be wanting to avoid the feeling of making other people feel burdened by they themselves being the one who's in need at that time. And that can make it really challenging for them to ask for help because they're just so much more comfortable being the caregiver. That comes more natural to them rather than being the one who is receiving the care. And then for North people are usually they're very attuned with their intuition, and they're very calm, they're very level headed, and they're very independent. So this means that their challenges are in things like asking for help. They're not used to needing other people because they are so independent all the time. So asking for help really doesn't occur to them. And when they do need it, it is uncomfortable for them to ask. They don't really know how to do this. North People are also generally very calculated. They really like to have time to assess a situation or assess the intervention or the suggestion that's being made to them and think it all the way through. So being rushed for them can feel like it's too much chaos, which they don't really handle so well and can kind of just make them want to back out of the situation altogether, which really doesn't work for birth if something is going on that you need to be making a decision on and having a conversation about with your care team. As you continue to explore and spend some time observing your type, you'll start to see how you need to prepare your specific communication strategy. So, if you're an East, you are going to need to practice being flexible and being open to discussion, open to suggestion. Avoid getting so stuck in your plan and restricting your options that you can't be flexible and accept a suggestion that's maybe going to help you if things feel like they're really getting stuck. If you're a South, you need to really practice with checking in with yourself, with your own intuition, to evaluate if what you're being told or what you're hearing from your care team or your birth partner feels right and aligns with your purpose for your birth. And that you're not just trying to make everybody on your birth team happy with the choices that you're making. If you're a West, you need to practice allowing yourself to be the one receiving care and to be aware whether you are trying to be pleasing or trying to avoid being a burden to your caregivers. If you're a North, you're going to want to prepare to be vulnerable. You're going to want to try to imagine what that's going to feel like. Start asking for help. Usually, I recommend starting with your birth partner, doing that now so that you get used to it by the time your birth arrives. And be open to sharing with your birth team that you may not come out and directly ask for the help that you need so that they know that it may be okay for them to come in and ask if you need assistance. And you can start doing all of these things now. You should be doing these things now, especially with your birth partner, with other members of your family, with coworkers or friends that you have the opportunity to see in the coming weeks or months before your birth, but definitely with your care team as well. Practice using these communication tools as you are having your final visits throughout your pregnancy so that you're comfortable using this by the time birth comes. Like the mom from the podcast who was realized she was trying to please her midwives as her West direction would dictate for her. If she doesn't recognize that pattern in herself, then that led to her not making the choices in her birth, allowing other people to make choices, and her accepting things that she after the birth was over realized she didn't want to or need to accept. And for her that was very clear because this was her fifth baby, so she had a fair amount of experience and realized after the fact that the reason that she accepted all those was for the wrong reason. You want to make sure if you're accepting any kind of intervention or any kind of change in what you want for your birth, it's for the right reason, not because you're trying to please somebody or because you're so stuck in your plan that you can't make a change. So, for that mom in the end, it really impacted her birth experience, but it didn't affect the midwives. It did make their job easier, which is great for them. But even if you're a West and you want to please everybody, or even if you're a South and you want to make everybody happy, in labor and birth, your job is not to make the experience easier for your care provider. It's not to make everybody on your birth team happy. They're there for you. It's not the other way around. Now, I don't mean to say to go in there and deliberately make it difficult. And you may have a birth that just goes so swimmingly easy that nothing comes up, that you don't even need to use much of these communication tools in birth itself. You may be pulling on these more after your baby arrives and you're in the newborn stage of things, where you have to pull out communication tools and decide what care you do want and don't want for your baby. But during the time of birth, you don't want the focus to be on the care team or on the birth. The focus should be on you and what you need to have your successful birth. Your job is only to have the best birth possible and to be supported by your birth team so that you can have the experience of a positive birth, which ultimately is what everybody wants, right? Even your birth team wants you to have a positive birth experience. But the box they have to check is healthy mom, healthy baby. So you are really the only one who's invested in making sure that you have that positive birth experience, while everybody else is going to be invested in the safety factor. We're not going to be able to change that about your birth team, but you can empower yourself to take charge of your experience throughout the labor. The more that you start practicing using your strengths and preparing for your challenges now in the time that you have before your birth, the more second nature the parts of your communication style that are more difficult for you, the more second nature that will be during your birth. And the stronger your natural strengths will be, the more easily you'll be able to pull those forward and you'll know exactly how to use them. Does that all make sense for you guys? Are you feeling a little more clarity on how to use your strength and kind of seeing the areas where you might have challenges or obstacles that could come up for you if you don't start preparing for them? Yes, yes, good, good, good. I'm glad this is clear. This is why the other day when I said that childbirth educators, we we're always trying to get people to start their childbirth education earlier, or some of us are anyway, because you want to be able to develop these skills into a good habit that's just there for you. When we stop focusing on just piling on information and facts and statistics and data, but we're teaching you how to be a confident person who can trust in yourself and trust in your body and trust in your communication. You want to have all the time in the world to practice that. So when you get there, you were just fully ready and prepared to speak for yourself. You have that voice. You don't have to try and find it when it's the worst possible time to have to be trying to find it. You don't want to have to force it or try and figure it out in that moment. So I'm glad you guys are here learning this and getting a lot out of it. So you'll be able to take this with you into your birth room. And then we're going to get to the next level, which is really one of my favorite parts. One of the things I really love about being a childbirth educator and the work that I do is being able to bring in birth partners in a way that really and truly helps them support you and really helps them be an actual part of the experience and not just a person kind of standing on the sideline who gets that deer in the headlights look, even, which is I don't like to see that in birth. I really like partners to be able to feel confident in their role, to be there to help you and support you, and that they can stand in their power and do what they know they need to do to help protect that experience for you and for your baby, and make sure that you have the good birth experience and the healthy mom, healthy baby at the end. I can't tell you the number of people who take childbirth courses that just teach partners the more logistical stuff, like how to time contractions, how to provide more hands-on comfort techniques. You know, a lot of people make this generalization, especially about male partners, but really with just birth partners in general, that they really prefer they're more comfortable with things that they can actively do or things that give them some kind of data or more statistical hardcore information. But I think that in most cases that's what we, as birth educators and birth professionals, that's what we've told them that their job is, and that's what we've been teaching them. It really hasn't been all that long that they've even been a part of being in the birth room. Like, they weren't allowed in birth rooms, at least not in the West, until quite recently. And then we just kind of threw them in and didn't really bring them into the experience of birth. So it's totally foreign to them. But I think that most, probably all of your birth partners, whether they're male, whether they're female, they're capable of so much more if we invite them into that sphere of birth, right? If we share with them the actual nature of birth, the ease with which the cycle of birth can unfold in a very clear way when you have a glimpse into the patterns and cycles of the birth pattern and of us as human beings and how we connect in at all of these levels with all of these different cycles. One of my students that I was talking with recently, we were doing a one-on-one call for her second birth because she wanted a different birth experience from what happened in her first birth. One of the things that was really important to her was helping her husband to be more prepared to help her this time. So she was telling me about how her husband, who's a North, I know we had somebody here who said their husband was also a North. He, during the birth, didn't end up finding the confidence to be able to step in and really help, to help be her voice during the birth that she needed. And in the way that they both really wanted him to, that she wanted him to, and that he really wanted to, and in the way that they thought they were preparing for. They had taken a childbirth education course, but when it actually came time to the labor and the birth, it didn't really manifest into the confidence that he needed. He didn't know what his role was. He didn't know how to help. They really, they realized that they hadn't really prepared in the right way for the level of support that she really needed in the birth itself. He did some of the comfort techniques that they learned, the birth partner stuff. Like if you've taken a class or read some books, there's like the slow dance hold. I know she mentioned that they did that, and like supported squats or different things like that, comfort techniques. But when it came to interventions or being told things that she couldn't do, things that she wanted to do in her birth because it was against the hospital policy, like how the position that she wanted to be into birth, or using intermittent monitoring, different things like that were coming up in the birth process that they didn't expect. He didn't know how to communicate with the doctors or the nurses, or even that he could. And then he didn't know what his wife wanted. And she had the birth didn't go exactly as she thought it was going to go. She had many days of non-progressing labor. So by the time they went to the hospital, she was really too exhausted to be able to fight for what she wanted with the medical team. And she really needed him to do that for her, but he didn't know how. And he didn't even know really if that was what she wanted at that point, or if she wasn't fighting for it because she didn't want it anymore. And they actually even had a doula there with them, but a doula is not able to speak for you in the hospital room. That's almost always the case in a hospital. And they hadn't prepared for any of the things that ended up happening in this labor. It went way off course. And so the whole communication scenario for them ended up basically becoming a mess. So she came to me for her second birth because she knew that communication was a big part of the problem in the first birth and what made it go the way that it went. And she didn't want to have that same thing happen in this second birth that happened in the first birth. So we were going through the birth story of what happened in the first birth, and she said that her husband kept saying this thing as she and him had been talking about how to try to make things different this time. He kept telling her that he really needed to know how she was feeling through that birth, what was going through her head, because he didn't know how to help advocate for her or even understand what help it was that she needed, that she wasn't able to express in the moment because she was at a point of being pretty exhausted. So one of the things that was showing me really clearly is that he had no interest in just being the husband who was holding her hand or just doing a comfort technique now and again. He wanted to be there to help solve what was clearly a broken situation. He wanted to be the voice that she needed, but he didn't know how to do that. And then being a North, he didn't know how to ask for help or really even think to ask for help in how to be a better communicator between his wife and the medical staff. And then as that situation spiraled further and further out of their control, also because he was a North, it's hard for them to feel like they can return to order when things reach a certain level of chaos. I wouldn't say their birth reached total chaotic, the highest chaos that it can be, but it definitely went that direction. So, that's why this is so important. So, this mom was coming to me for her second birth so that they could approach everything with a really solid communication strategy. And so her partner could actually be involved in this birth and actually help be a voice if she needed it, which is what they both wanted. The role, they both wanted him to have this active role in the birth. They just didn't know how to implement the tools to help him do that. So, all of that to say that I think that this theory that we have, or this idea that we hold, that the birth partner is most comfortable doing just hands-on support or timing contractions, or is only useful in some capacity like that, that's a complete myth. It's a stereotype and is a really unfortunate box that we've put birth partners in. But what we've been doing this week is trying to break down some of these myths about what happens in birth and all different levels and build up new, stronger, effective strategies. So that's what we're doing right now with birth partners. So bringing your birth partner in, and I really suggest that you have them identify their type as well. Some of you have already been able to do that because then you can see how the two of you can work together, how your different strengths and your different challenges pair together to fill in where each other's challenges are. And this also applies to all of your other relationships, really. And this will apply to your partnering relationship forever, right? How you parent, how you are in your marriage or your partnership, any partnership type of relationship, these kind of communication strategies are going to apply. So if you're an East, your partner is going to understand that they can be prepared to support you even more if things need to change because they're already going to know that this might be an obstacle for you. And they can remind you that this is a time that you might need to be flexible. Or they can see if you're being too rigid or too stiff in your labor, and they can help you identify that your East inflexibility is taking over and help you to get past it so that you can move through your labor more fluidly. If you're a South, they can be prepared to help you identify if you're trying to make your birth team happy or if you're truly sticking to your birth why and staying true to what it is that you want for your birth experience. Or if you're being too flexible with your birth plan and letting too many things go that they know are actually really important to you for your birth and you might regret later. If you're a West, your partner can help you prepare to be on the receiving end of caregiving so that you are ready to accept being the one who gets nurtured and who receives help if you do need any extra help during your labor. And if you're a North, your partner can be prepared to watch for you maybe isolating or pulling away, hiding your vulnerabilities, not being able to ask for help. And they can help you prepare for how to ask for help. They can even be the person who's doing that part for you so that you feel like you have that safety net of getting the help that you need, but not having to be concerned about how you're going to get it. Do those make sense? All right. So, like I said already, if you know that, or if you know your birth partner's type, then the two of you can find synergy in your whole communication strategy, which is such a powerful tool for you to have in your birth kit. What's interesting, and it has been true so far for the people here who have done both your typing and your partner's typing, I almost never see couples who have the same birth type resonance, the same dominant direction type. So usually you're going to have two different types, and those two types can work together to give you a stronger, more complete set of communication tools. You just have to know what your two types are, and then you have to know what the strengths are of those types and what the challenges are for each type so you can prepare to fill in for each other in those challenges, or maybe in the case of the birth partner, they can prepare for how to overcome that challenge. So if they need to step up into another aspect of those directions, because remember, we can use all of these directions when moments arise that we need to pull in the strength of another direction. We have the capacity to do that. We just need to know that we might have to be prepared to do that. And that's the case even more so, really, sometimes for birth partners, because if you're at a point of exhaustion, or you are so deep in labor that you don't want to have to think, you don't want to have to pull yourself back up into that decision making part of your brain, your birth partner can be there to do that part for you. In fact, in our childbirth course, I have birth partners go through their own little mini lesson to explain why learning all of this is really so important. So, I know sometimes birth partners aren't really excited about doing a childbirth course. And right now, in a lot of places, a lot of this stuff still being online, you're not taking them to a place where they have to sit. So they have to take that extra step to go on to the website and watch the videos or do the reading or whatever style of course it is. But when it's a kind of course like this, where they get to see, it's not just a bunch of facts and statistics and information, they actually get to jump into a course that's teaching them about themselves and teaching you how to work together in a more powerful way in so many aspects of your life. It actually can get them really excited to learn about the whole thing and to be a part of the process, because they can really they're not going to experience your birth in the same way that you will. I mean, nobody can even two women who've had babies, their experiences are still going to be completely different. We can never truly understand another woman's birth experience, but they can be so much more connected because they understand the cycle of birth, and they understand who you are a little bit more based on these directional types and who they are and how the two of you work together. So I even have students sometimes who invite other members of their birth team. It might be their doula, or if they're having a sister or their mom come to the birth with them to act as a doula type role or extra support person, just so that everyone has this language and this perspective and this understanding of, things to watch out for you, and what you as the birthing woman are going through, and how to view the birth cycle from this perspective. The other difference in an approach like this for childbirth education is that you have a connection with everyone who knows the birth cycle in this way, and everybody else is, if it's just you and your birth partner, it's a language that the two of you share in your birth. So the two of you can kind of drop into this your own little world that doesn't require a lot of thinking, because it becomes really intuitive since you're just using this one framework over and over again for everything. Everyone else just kind of gets pushed to the periphery. They're just there watching the birth unfold, being there just on call, while you and your birth partner are having an experience that really connects you so deeply to each other, and even really to the very earth itself, because you're going to be so cued in to all of these cycles of nature that you just have this bigger kind of otherworldly experience in how birth really unfolds. It can be such a powerful way to give birth and have this really deep and private connection with your birth partner and with your baby, because your baby's also going through this experience and these birth cycles as well. And it just takes everything to a whole nother level that really brings the body and mind together with the the larger scope of life and kind of the purpose behind why really we're all here, which is a pretty amazing thing, an amazing glimpse that birth really gives us, that we don't get a lot of other opportunities in our life to see that. But birth is one of those times that you really have the opportunity to see that deeply into life. The thing about why this preparation has such an incredible impact on your birth, you can know everything about birth that we know at this point in time. You could become a fully board certified obstetrician with decades of experience, or you could become a midwife who's practiced midwifery all over the world in all kinds of situations and seen all kinds of births. But when you're sitting at one birth, nothing about that birth is predictable. You can know everything that there is to know about birth itself, and you can never be able to predict the progression or the outcome of your labor. You can't know if your birth is going to be fast or if it's going to be slow, if it's going to be a long, drawn out birth or a short and quick birth. You don't know if you're going to get the urge to push or if your baby is just going to slip out. You don't know if you can manage contractions. You don't know if your baby's going to be in a perfect birth position or if you're going to have to work a little bit to get baby out. You don't even have a guarantee that your baby is healthy, no matter how many number of ultrasounds or other testing you've done. We just can't know everything about life ever. Nothing is ever a guarantee for us. But you can be confident that your body knows how to give birth, that your body will attune to the cycles that are as old as the earth itself if you let it open up to birth. And that means that you need to be prepared for everything. But being prepared for everything, which sounds super overwhelming, it does not mean that you need to know all of the things that could go wrong or that you need to know all of the interventions that could be offered. It means that you need to know your strengths, that you need to know your communication strategy. You need to know yourself. You need to know the birth cycle. You need to know your birth partner. And you need to know how all of this comes together inside of you at the time of your birth. And you know how to use all of that to handle the unexpected or to pivot your birth situation should you need to. And if you get really clear on the birth cycle itself, you will know when something is wrong or when things are going exactly as they should. I'll share a little bit more about that tomorrow when we go a little bit deeper into confidence and support. And I'll share some other strategies that some of my moms have used in all kinds of situations that have come up in their births. So, how are you guys feeling about this information today? About working with your birth partner, about really understanding your communication style, strengths, your challenges, about bringing all of that in to just have a more prepared, more confident strategy for your birth. Good, 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 good. I'm glad you guys are feeling good about this. So, tomorrow for our last class, we're going to cover what it looks like to really find your strength. And we'll look at what steps to be doing after this class so you can continue to develop all of this information that you've learned this week. Until we meet tomorrow, I want you to spend some time observing how your type is showing up in your communication. And if you're open to it, I know some of you already have, but try to encourage your birth partner to identify their type if they haven't done so already. You might already have a really strong idea of what your birth partner's type is. If you know your birth partner really well, then you might already know what their type is. But sometimes having them do the assessment or talking with them about the types will just help draw them into the material and make them curious about what you're learning. Because really, everybody likes to learn new ways to understand themselves and really human nature in general. Like it's something that we're usually pretty curious about. And we all really benefit from doing self evaluation, especially in regard to communication, and especially these days when we have so many ways that we communicate and so many things that could potentially disrupt our communication because communication in general has just changed a lot in the last couple of decades. And then in regard to something as foreign and amazing as birth and something that is not a do-over. You want to get it. You want to get it right the first time. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed the third installment of this workshop, and be sure to look for the fourth and final in this series coming up soon. Subscribe to the podcast to be notified when it's released. And if you would like to be notified of future live virtual workshops, you can register at naturalbirthcompass.com/natural birth workshop and get on the list to be the first to know of our next workshop. If you would like the opportunity to start working with me to prepare for your birth, please visit naturalbirthcompass.com/course, where you can learn more about my online childbirth education course. And if it aligns with your vision for your birth, you can join right away for immediate access to the on-demand content and join in for our monthly live group coaching calls. Stay tuned for the final episode from this workshop. Until then, wishing you a wonderful journey to birth.